Welcome to our fourth Masterworks concert of the season, which we are calling American Memories. We are featuring five composers on this program total. And here I'm going to talk first about three of those compositions on tonight's program. They were all written by composers who were contemporaries with one another. So we have George Gershwin, who's American in Paris, closes the program, the work that dates from 1928. And he was born in 1898. A year before Gershwin was born, uh, another one of our composers was born, and he was William Grant Still. He was born in 1897. And 10 years before Still, another composer on tonight's program whose work opens tonight's concert, Florence Price, was born in 1887. Incidentally, both Price and Still were born in Little Rock, Arkansas. Gershwin, of course, is well known for Rhapsody in Blue, American in Paris, these works, as well as many songs that have now become part of the American Songbook. I'm going to start with William Grant Still. So he was born in Little Rock, and one of his main instruments was oboe, actually. He attended various schools. He, at one point, was at Oberlin Conservatory, which is, to this day, one of the leading music schools in Ohio. And when he graduated, he moved to New York City in 1919. So after he graduated, he started working in New York City as a arranger for people like W.C. Handy, well known for tunes like St. Louis Blues, people like Artie Shaw. So he started kind of mingling with the leading jazz musicians of the day in New York City, while also still wanting to pursue serious studies of composition as well. So he was well known at the time as a young man as an arranger, but he was still working on his compositional skills as well. In 1921, he was hired to play several performances in the pit of a groundbreaking musical called Shuffle Along that launched the career of Josephine Baker and Florence Mills. And this was also considered the first very successful Broadway musical to fully incorporate jazz as its main musical ingredient, or musical language. And so Still had the chance to live with this in 1921. At the time, Shuffle Along was so popular that it actually did a tour to Boston. So after a long run in New York City, also they took the show to Boston and Still went along as one of the musicians in the pit orchestra for that production. And while he was in Boston, and taking up residency there for a brief period during the run of this musical, he decided to take further composition lessons with the person who was considered sort of elder statesman, I guess if you would, of American composers at the time. And his name was George Chadwick, and he was based in Boston. And we don't really play a lot of Chadwick's music today on stage, but he was considered sort of a realist as a composer. So he was really interested in incorporating folk song or folk song like melodies in his work, rather than music style maybe that was deeply rooted in European tradition. He was one of those composers who was trying to create American style of composition. And his subject matters in his music often dealt with common folks, if you would, in the country and their way of life and so on. So William Grant Still had a chance to work a little bit with Chadwick, and that also influenced his own style as well, as we'll see in the piece we're going to play. Later on, he actually also studied sort of almost like a complete contrast. He studied with a famous avant-garde composer at the time, Edgar Varese, and Varese was known as an experimental composer. So Still was studying and observing a lot of different styles and influences as a young composer. In 1930, he wrote his first symphony, which he subtitled Afro-American Symphony, and that is the work that we are going to be performing tonight. And the main musical language, or the idiom, if you would, that binds this symphony together is blues. And by 1930, he was deeply involved with the Harlem Renaissance, and part of that movement as a composer for him was using blues, incorporating that into a symphony, which was considered a serious musical form. And by doing so, he was hoping to elevate the status of blues into the concert stage as well, and showing to fellow composers, music lovers, audiences, and performers alike that blues can form a resourceful and beautiful main ingredient for a full movement symphony, and he demonstrated that in this work. Each of the four movements have two different titles, which is kind of interesting. Also shows his mindset a little bit. He has Italian indications for each of the movements, but then he also has sort of a subtitle that he apparently was more of a personal titles for him. So the first movement, for instance, he wanted to call it Longing. The second movement he wanted to call Sorrow. And then, so all of these things where you can kind of read into the sort of the state of mind that he was in a little bit. Later on, he became, throughout his career, he now is considered, he has a nickname, and that is the Dean. He's considered the Dean of African American composers. He was the very first African American composer to have a symphony commissioned and performed by a major orchestra in this country. He was the first African American composers to have commissioned a major opera, as well as he had one of his operas that was televised nationally as well. And he became an inspiration and influence to many generations of composers after him. I've always wanted to do this piece, and just haven't had the chance before this. So I'm particularly looking forward to conducting this piece by William Grant Still for the first time here in Colombia, and sharing it with you in the audience as well. Florence Price, as I mentioned, she was also born in Little Rock, but she also studied in Boston as well. She was accepted to attend the New England Conservatory. Once again, it is still to this day one of the major institutions for musicians. It's considered one of the leading conservatories really in the world. And she was accepted to study at the New England Conservatory at the age of 14. And as a pianist first, her main instruments are piano and organ. But also at the NEC, she studied composition as well. She then later moved back to Little Rock by way of Atlanta. She lived in Atlanta for a while. She taught music there. She served as a professor of music at one of the universities in Atlanta. That's where she met her husband, who was a civil rights activist. And they moved then back to her hometown of Little Rock. After a few years, though, because of the civil unrest, they decided to move to Chicago. And that's where she spent most of her career after that. And at one point, she was actually working as a composer, but also as a single mother as well after they got a divorce, and raising two daughters single-handedly. She was her first symphony, and she wrote 4 symphonies. And in the last few years, her works are now becoming rediscovered and performed around the world. I think there's an ongoing cycle of recordings that's being done by the Philadelphia Orchestra for complete symphonies, for instance. We are opening the concert with a shorter works, one of her shorter works called the Concert Overture Number 2, which uses as, again, in the case of William Grant Still, blues was the musical building block for his symphony. In the case of the piece by Florence Price that you're going to hear, the melodies, the musical DNA or musical building blocks for her composition are spirituals. So you will hear three spirituals that are featured throughout the piece, starting with Go Down Moses, for instance. And it is indicative of her style as well. She was deeply interested in incorporating spirituals or traditional music, dances and music of African American life, and bringing that into the concert hall as well. Her works, many of them were lost for a few decades, and so after her death, her music was not performed for several decades. But now, the new publishers and becoming these scholars and performers with their interest and their hard work in bringing back Price's work back to life, we are now fortunate to be able to perform and share her works with you, for instance, tonight. If you're curious about her works, other works, if the piece you hear tonight piques your interest for further investigation into Price's music, I would recommend perhaps her piano concerto, which is a beautiful piece. It's in one movement that's now getting a lot of performances around the country, as well as her first symphony of the four, and kind of get a sense of her musical landscape as well. George Gershwin wrote American in Paris, of course, in 1928. And here, it is one of the most well-known American pieces in the repertoire. And it is, of course, the sort of a travelogue, if you would, as the title suggests, an American tourist or so in Paris. And you will hear the busy street noises, including the famous taxi horns, to kind of show the hustle and bustle of urban life in Paris. Of course, the set tourist gets homesick, right? So you might be having a great time exploring new cities, new countries, and so on. But sometimes maybe you're back at the hotel room and you feel the sense of homesickness a little bit. And that's where, of course, the famous middle section featuring this very much like a blues-like melody that is now introduced by the trumpet first and taken up by the whole orchestra and so on. Altogether, it is also considered, it's, for me at least, it's perhaps one of the most tightly constructed and organic symphonic poems by American composers ever written. And I'm glad to be able to close this concert with American in Paris. Before we get to the intermission of this program, we are featuring a world premiere and a work that's written by Dick Goodwin, who many of you know Dick and his music, also his work as a composer as well as arranger and performer, leading big bands and orchestras and so on here in Colombia. And I'm particularly thrilled to be a part of this world premiere. He wrote a new song cycle that is based on poems written by Dr. Frank Clark, featuring tenor Johnnie Felder. And Johnny will also be singing the beloved Nessun Dorma by Puccini tonight as well. The only non-American work on the program, but it is obviously such a beloved work, and I'm thrilled to have Johnny sing it as well. Earlier, I had the opportunity to sit down over Zoom with Dick Goodwin, the composer, Dr. Frank Clark, who wrote the poem that became the inspiration for these three songs, as well as Johnnie Felder, who will be singing them. So please enjoy our introduction to these new works by Dick Goodwin.
Well, every time we have a world premiere, that is certainly an exciting event. And this on this particular program, it is even more so because of this amazing team of collaborators that we have together for this particular world premiere. So I am joined today by Dick Goodwin, who composed these three songs for tenor and orchestra, with Johnnie Felder, who is going to be singing all of those songs, and then Dr. Frank Clark, who wrote the poems, the text for these songs that you're going to hear for the very first time on the Koger Center stage. So we're just going to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to start with you, Frank, because I think you really brought this team together. So I would love to, for our viewers to kind of get the background story of how this all kind of came together.
Thanks, Morihiko, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all. So I first had the opportunity of meeting Dr. Dick Goodwin and his wife Winky at a Healing Harmonies concert that they did at the Prisma Health system in Greenville, where I have worked for the last 4 years. So, as many of you know on the call, I'm a adult psychiatrist in Greenville, South Carolina, and I've always had a appreciation for the healing power of music. And so when I was on the board of the Philharmonic back in residency in Columbia, South Carolina, I helped found the Healing Harmonies program, and Dick and Winky have been very instrumental in promoting that program over the last couple of years. And so they agreed to do a virtual concert, a Christmas concert for not only our patients at our psychiatric facility in Greenville, Marshall Pickens Hospital, as well as our faculty. And so I really enjoyed the program. And then afterwards, I learned that Dr. Goodwin is a phenomenal composer and decided to take a leap of faith and reach out to him and ask if he had ever set poetry to music. And he said, I have. And so I said, well, would you mind if I send you over some of my poems that I have written? And I didn't know that he was really going to take me seriously when I asked the question. And he looked them over and he said, I think we can work with this. And as we got further into this collaboration, we started to think about, well, who could do these pieces justice? Who do we know that is a phenomenal vocalist? And it turns out at the time, I didn't know that Dick knew Johnnie, and he didn't know that I knew Johnnie. And Johnnie and I go way back to our beginnings at Fourth Presbyterian, Shandon Presbyterian Church in Columbia. I was a member of that church when I was a resident, and Dick said, "Oh, I know Johnnie. He's phenomenal." And so we said, "Well, this is fantastic." And so I reached out to Johnnie on Facebook Messenger. It had been a while, and I said, "Hey, Johnnie, this is what I'm thinking." Johnnie loves Dick. Johnnie and I have had a friendship over the years, and so here we are today.
And when was this? Do you remember? Like when did this sort of the the three of you kind of all got together?
Probably last year sometime. I would say maybe I can't remember the month. The months. Johnnie, do you remember?
Might have been late March, April, maybe. I think
That's
that's
yeah.
when you first sent me the poem.
That's about right.
Oh, okay, all right. And then that's yeah. And then at one point, Frank, you texted. I think you texted me with the idea, sort of in a very like a bullet point kind of thing, and I can't remember if that at that point. In any case, I think when I was looking at this particular concert, which was going to be all American, uh, all American program, uh, and then it looked like it would be a perfect fit for this program. Uh, so so Dick, when at this point when we were when the three of you were talking about it, was it initially was it did you know it was going to be orchestra, that it'll be done with the orchestra, or, did it sort of start in your mind as a song, more of a, song cycle with piano, or, how did that?
Oh, it really did start as a piece for tenor and piano.
Mhm.
And I had Johnny's sound and his passion in my ear as I composed. The pianist that he works with is terrific, and so I was able to write, but it was very intimate, kind of
Right.
piano sound. So when Frank told me that you had agreed to put it on the orchestra program, I thought, well, that's great. The only thing is that it's not orchestrated. So that was the next thing. And I just an influence of mine, Ravel is, great orchestrator. And if you compare the Mussorgsky pictures at an exhibition to the orchestral version, Ravel didn't change any octaves or anything. I mean, he was able to, pretty much do what was there. A few practical fixes. But in this case, I had no idea that we were talking about doing it for orchestra, and so it's a very intimate kind of piano part, and so I really had to rethink it for this program.
Mm-hmm. And I think because of the intimacy, I think you had achieved in the piano version of it. I think it comes through in the orchestrated version just because of the different solo. There are many wonderful solo moments for instruments within the orchestra. So you have this. I'm not worried about balance with Johnny and the orchestra, and it does play out. I mean, it is an orchestral accompaniment, but also feels like chamber music. It has that level of intimacy and intricacy to it.
Yeah, well, that's great that you feel the same way about it. One of the nice things is that I know most of the players in the Philharmonic,
right.
And I've watched you bring the orchestra to a different level, and have enjoyed watching that. So I knew who I was writing for. I was writing for you and all the individual players. So I didn't, write, trumpet 2 part. I wrote it for, the player that I envisioned to be sitting in that chair.
Yeah. So then what was the process like, for between you and Dick and Johnny, as far as the creation of this, process? Were there a lot of sort of, I'm always curious to find how composers work with different performers for whom they are writing. Were there like Zoom calls, or like were there just a lot of drafts going back and forth, or did you meet in person? Because a lot of this probably happened during the pandemic too, so that's another layer of it, as well. So just kind of curious if you and Johnny want to talk about that.
I've only heard one of the songs with piano, and that was the first time, I think, Frank, that we met in person, too. But I think that the most of the texts that I've set have been people that I've known, with a few exceptions. I have used Mark Twain remarks, for pieces and things like that. So it's really nice to get to know the person that's doing the text, or in this case, poems. And what I didn't really realize or didn't think about is that writers are supposed to write what they know. And so this has more medical terms in it than I've ever gotten to set before. and Frank said, oh, you know, you can change whatever you need to change. I decided I don't think I changed anything except maybe repeating a line that I thought was really powerful. But other than that, I did it as Frank wrote it.
Mhm. And then as far as the for Johnny, like
with
yeah,
Johnny. So I sent him the songs, and every once in a while he said, you know, I could do this higher. And so the keys kept getting higher.
right,
And yeah, and I said, Johnny, I don't want to wear you out. And he said, oh, don't worry about that. He said, I'm stronger than an elephant. So he ends the third song on a long extended high C.
yeah.
And I'm not going to say what it is, but I hope that we'll also do an encore, and the one that we have in mind, its highest note is a B. So I thought this was good. But
Yeah.
that's true. Johnny, did you feel like I was writing for you?
I do. I think we never really we never got together on a Zoom call or met up in person until I think it was maybe September. All three of us got together in Greenville at the Civil Museum, the music museum there, and that's where I first performed Foggy Brown Sugar, and in a very also intimate setting, and it was pretty cool. It was well received. But it's just so cool and nice to be able to relate to a text. One of the poems is about a child being reared in the home with two loving parents. Um, I only have nieces, nephews, and godchildren, so I don't, really know what that's about. But the other two texts, Foggy Brown Sugar and Partial Absence, they really, really hit home because of the text. And I don't think I've ever told you this, Frank, but this week specifically, those texts have been really, really resonating with me after having, spent a lot of time with it. It's so easy to, just focus on the music and on rhythms and making sure intonation and all that stuff is, solid. But going back to the text and just reading it as a poem was so poignant for me.
Yeah, I mean the text is so powerful and
Mhm.
poignant as you mentioned,
And it
which
relates
kind of brings us to Frank, to you, and we've known each other for a few years now, and from the time that you were initially in Colombia, and I knew that you liked you being. How long have you been writing poems? Really, is that something you started as
Pro-
growing
uh,
up, or?
no, actually, I started writing poetry when I was in medical school. It's probably been over a decade now, and the impetus for my writing, I was in a I was in a dark season in my life. I was diagnosed with clinical depression in medical school, and I have been in remission now probably for over a decade. But I still do my own therapy twice a month just to stay well, because I think that's important, especially in being a healthcare provider, just being a human being. I think it's important for us to take care of ourselves. But went through a lot of academic struggles in medical school, and running had always been one of my ways of coping. I was a collegiate runner and ran in high school as well, but I wanted to find something else that would give me some hope and meaning in my life. And that's what poetry has done for me. It really allows me to express myself, especially during a pandemic and other things that are going on in our country. And so I never really envisioned my poetry actually being shared with a wider audience. And I tended to be a little bit shy back then in terms of whether I would share it or not. And I think over the years, I've just become more comfortable with being vulnerable and just putting it out there. And I think, at least from friends and family that I've heard from and colleagues, that they've really appreciated it. I think sometimes you don't really know how your words will have an impact on people. it's been a blessing for me to share, and I hope that it's been a blessing for people to read. And Johnny, no, I did not know that. I know you and I had discussed previously how some of the text had impacted you, but I'm blessed to know that, you know, it has really resonated with you. I know Dick and I talked about one of the pieces, and actually I remember Dick messaging me on or sending an email to me about partial absence, and he said, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I'm going to have to, this might take a little bit more time. This kind of hits home. This really strikes a chord. And so I'm hopeful as when people in the audience hears it, whether it be in person or virtually this next Saturday, that that it resonates with people, because it's something that's important to me, and I think we all need to be better about being vulnerable. It doesn't have to be poetry. We all have a lot of things to share, and a lot of unique skill sets, and I'm just honored that you know, that I get to share this on a bigger stage.
Yeah, I think that sense of being vulnerable, I think does, you know, that is a such a powerful message, you know, especially during the pandemic. And you know, when I was growing up, really the person who really raised me as a when I was a you know, kid was my grandmother. And you know, she passed away a few years ago, and you know, she had dementia. And so it was, you know, so you know, some of that, you know, and I, you know, I grew up in a household, you know, was in a single parent household. My parents got divorced when I was very little, so I have no memory whatsoever of my father, who I didn't meet again till just a few years back, you know. So you know, so between like age of like 2 and like age of 40, you know, I had never even seen my father face to face. So you know, a lot of this, yeah, it's been, you know, there's it happens more often, definitely with music, with text, right, where the text can kind of affect you, you know, it kind of touches you in a different way than, and you know, than, let's say, a strict you know, absolute music with no programmatic context, written for instruments or something like that. So it's been kind of a unique experience for me studying this piece and preparing it for performance. And yeah, just, you know, just be honored. I'm just so honored to be a part of this process, you know, and looking forward to us being all in person together in the next few days to bring this to life. So before we wrap it up, for Johnny, and also, well, for all of you, like each of you, what is one thing that you would like our listeners and viewers, concert goers, to kind of look forward to for this piece? So we'll start with Dick, with you as a composer.
Oh my goodness. Well, I what I hope is that we do have an audience that you know, is really listening, because there are so many, you know, wonderful details in the text, and I, you know, did my best to, you know, to try to bring those out, you know, with the music and echo in the music what's in the text. So
Johnny, as a
I would have to say text as well. Dr. Goodwin has done an amazing job with setting this text, and even when in partial absence, when he talks about delirium, you know, the melodic line gets a little, you know, a little frantic. So I would say that, you know, relate to the text, allow yourself to just be in the moment, and again, be vulnerable.
yeah. And I think, Frank, you mentioned it, but you want to also.
I will echo everything that my colleagues have said. Be mindful. Just be center your mind. Be mindful of the text. I hope that it takes you to a place of wonder, a place of hope. maybe a place of reconciliation and healing. That's my hope for the audience. You know, I want to thank you, Morihiko, for agreeing to have this premiere, because this doesn't happen without you as the maestro and conductor of the South Carolina Philharmonic. So I just want to give a hearty felt thank you and appreciation for you and our friendship, and to Dr. Goodwin and Johnnie. I love you guys, and I'm really I think it was emotional to hear it in September, but I'm sure I will have some tears. Tears of joy and appreciation is basically how I can best describe it. So
Yeah, this is going to be a wonderful program, you know, together, and kind of shows music's ability to bring people together, you know, first of all, but also to comfort in time of crisis and time of need, but also, you know, ability to energize us and entertain us as well. So, you know, with the whole program with American works, pieces by, you know, also including pieces by Florence Price, William Grant Still, and George Gershwin, along with this this brand new piece with Dr. Goodwin. So just going to be a phenomenal evening altogether. I just can't wait. So thank you for being part of it, and we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.